Next up, we have Jonathan. Jonathan is a development manager at Atlassian. He's part of the team that kind of works on the look and feel of all our products. They are, and we call them like AUI and ADG, which is basically the Atlassian Design Guidelines and the Atlassian User Interface.
That's right.
Yeah, I got it right. A strong advocate for user experience. You know, he is responsible for all of our look and feel, and so he's going to tell us what it's like to be a disruptor in a disruptor. Come on stage.
Okay, thanks, Vivian. All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Happy Summit. I'm glad you've come to my talk. Is there anyone here who was at my talk last year? Awesome, cool. Well, hopefully it's like partially as good as last year. Last year was great. Being a disruptor and a disruptor, influencing without authority. What's that about? Let me start by introducing myself. I'm Jonathan. Vivian's done an excellent introduction, thank you. I'm really known for two things at Atlassian. The first is my beard, clearly, and in particular, my floral beard, which I wore to an end of financial year event one year. That's the thing that I definitely get stopped in the corridor for. The second thing that I'm known for at Atlassian is work-related, and it's my work on performance. So I'm a passionate believer in performance, in speed. I would say that Atlassian applications are good in speed. They're comparable to their competitors. On the other hand, they're not best in class. And I'm a passionate believer that taking a product's performance from great or acceptable or above average to best in class to world best provides continual returns on the user experience, and that until you're actually at best in class and you can't get any faster, you should keep investing in it. However, and I've had success in convincing other people of this, and Jira and Confluence now have people looking at speed, particularly in on-demand. However, that's not what my talk is about today, influencing without authority. What I'm really talking about is how that whole process of taking an idea, something that you believe in, and landing it on the roadmap. We're all in the software industry. One characteristic of the software industry and the people in it is that we're pretty passionate about what we do, right? I love doing software. I know that many of you in the audience have ideas about how you can work better at your company, about your ideas, and that maybe some of your ideas should be on the roadmap, right? It's very easy to have ideas. Taking ideas to completion, landing your ideas, that's hard, right? Getting other people to buy into it, getting other people to invest in it. And this talk is about the lessons I've learned on doing that, where I've failed and where I've done well and where I've had success. I'm going to draw upon examples from work that I've done, a lot from performance, as I've discussed, and also my current sort of crusade, which is web accessibility, making our applications more accessible by people with, blind people, people with vision conditions, motor skills conditions. And that's another area where Atlassian are okay, but we can also get a lot better. Now, I'm going to start off with a story. At the end of 2012, I was a team lead on Jira. It was great, and I became the UI architect at Atlassian, right? Cross-product, it was fantastic. I was really happy with it. And I said, you know what, I'm going to work on performance, right? And so the first thing I did was to work on asynchronous loading of JavaScript and CSS resources. So any of you who work in front-end development will know that's a technique for making your applications faster. And it was a little bit hard because of some complications in the Atlassian plugin stack. So I worked on this and I did it. It was like some of the greatest hero coding I've ever done. I finished it January 2013. And I went to products and said, hey, people have been asking and say, we can't do this. It's now available. We can all use it. Great. Cut to mid-2013, so 6 months later. How many products are actually using it? One. There was one like back kind of admin area in Stash, like a configuration screen that was using it. So really, by any kind of yardstick, that's a failure, right? Spent a lot of time on something, coded it up, no one's using it. Since then, I've had a lot more success, right? What's caused this success? And so I'm going to talk about the sort of, way that I understand this and the way that I approach it. And it's kind of a 3-step program, right? First thing, what's the problem? The error that I made was telling people that there's like a technical solution available without actually convincing them of like the value of performance, right? Now, how do you convince a decision maker in something? You can go and talk to them. I can go up to people and say, hey, you know, like, yeah, performance, man, we should be investing in performance. Dude, you show me 10 developers, I'll show you 8 people who'll talk your ear off about performance, right? It's not a very convincing argument for me to go to a decision maker, a product manager, or a business manager and say, yeah, performance. What does have an impact is the voice of the customer. And this is the tool that you have to use. What does your organization use? So user feedback, right? Upstairs, we're running user sessions, which, you know, I'd all encourage you to participate in, which is, you know, recording you interacting with a prototype and doesn't actually work. What other things do we do? Metrics, right? So the thing that I did after, you know, mid-2013, after I sort of failed getting anyone to buy into performance, was to implement metrics, to actually track how our software actually feels sort of from end to end for people in a browser using Atlassian on demand. Having those numbers, raw data, is a convincing argument. The other thing is competitor evaluation, right? So how are you compared to your competitors? Are they better at you? Do they have this feature that you're passionate about and we don't have it? Well, that's a strong argument too. Now, this might not be your day job, right? You might be a developer, you might be in testing. Well, if you want your idea to land, you've got to learn this stuff, okay? Without data or the voice of the customer backing you up, you're not going to get anywhere. The next part, what's the business impact? I'm going to put this water down here so that I don't knock it all over my laptop. So you need to learn what your business uses to evaluate the impact, right, in terms of it might be tangible things like revenue. Does it increase leads? Does it increase bookings? Or you might also use metrics, right? So at Atlassian, we use Net Promoter Score, NPS. We use monthly average usage. You know, will your feature kind of increase that? Will it decrease the support contact rate? These are the metrics that we can use. And if you can tie your idea to one of these, then that's great. Now, I've got a story. I'm a bit of a like data nerd, and I really love, you know, you walk through life these days and you kind of get surveyed about everything. I took my children to a museum in Sydney, and you know, I booked the tickets online, so they had the email. They had my email, and they emailed me a survey afterwards. And one of the questions on the survey was Net Promoter Score. Was a Net Promoter Score question, right? For those of you who don't know, Net Promoter Score is basically the idea that, or to really boil it down, is the idea that instead of asking you, hey, rate Jira out of 10, I'll ask you, how likely are you to recommend Jira to a colleague? That's a much better, that gives you a lot better data, and the answer that someone's going to give there is a lot more valuable. So I went to the museum and I got this survey, and one of the questions on the survey was, how likely are you to recommend? And immediately I'm thinking, oh, cool, NPS, yes, love it, awesome. And they said, how likely are you to recommend that the Tyrannosaurs exhibition, which I'd been to, enhances the artistic value of the Sydney Cultural Precinct? And I thought, you know, I would probably never actually do that. So my point here, if you're going to do metrics, do them properly, learn it. To tie business value. Now, the other thing that I found in my performance journey, I struggled for a very long time to really get a convincing argument in terms of the business impact for performance. And I spent a long time fairly unsuccessfully working on this. The fact is, some projects kind of lend themselves to it naturally and some don't. I'm going to illustrate that by talking about a project I worked on Jira many years ago. So for Jira users, you'll know that a couple of years ago, if you wanted to edit an issue, you had to open up a dialog and change it. And we implemented inline edit, which I was really proud of, where you could just click on a field, change it, and click away. Now, what's the business impact of this? How does this change, like, bookings, revenue, overall? Well, the answer is, like, no one really knows, you know? Before, at the planning stage, you know, you could put a convincing argument saying that this is going to, you know, well, we think this will impact NPS. Or you could try and say, well, we think it's going to increase revenue by this much. But, you know, it's a fairly long bow to draw. Even after when the product has landed, okay, you can say revenue's gone up, NPS has increased, something like that, oops. But you've probably landed like 3 or 4 big ticket items in that same period, and it's kind of hard to actually, isolate which one of those items actually contributed to that increase. But what you do know is if we don't implement this, then like a couple of years down the track, our products will feel really dated, people will start preferring our competitors, and we'll start losing. So you need to do this stuff. The point is here, not every project lends itself to tying naturally to business value. Some do. Does a project which doesn't have a strong tie to business value always beat a project which doesn't? No, because otherwise you'd never implement something like inline edit. The third part of my 3-step formula is the solution. What's the solution? And really the goal here, you're not trying to be prescriptive. You're not planning, breaking down your kind of idea or your proposal for fixing it into stories and epics. What you're doing is this. With the first steps, the problem and the business impact, you've convinced people why you should do it. You've described the problem. You've convinced them that there is a problem. Now you want to show them that there's a solution. If you don't do this, you've just dumped a big problem in their lap. No one really likes that. You need to convince them that your idea is achievable and that the cost for implementing it or achieving it, is sensible given the proposed benefit. Now, when I'm talking about the solution, one of my favorite quotes, which is related to accessibility, is from Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. And he was in a heated conversation with someone, and he said, when we work on making our products accessible by the blind, I don't consider the bloody ROI. And I love that. That's like an awesome quote. But you know what? I'm pretty sure that at a very deep and innate level, Tim Cook is actually concerned about the ROI, and he is concerned about the bottom line. When he says that, what he's doing is this. When I work on making our products accessible by the blind, that's why. That's the problem. I don't consider the bloody ROI. What he means there, if you read between the lines, I've been proposed a solution, and the cost of the solution is below a threshold where I care how much it costs. If it costs $2 billion, I'm sure Tim Cook is concerned about the ROI at that point in time. So, my plan, landing your idea. What's the problem? What's the business impact? And how are we going to solve this? That's it. All right, cool. We're like 12 minutes through. You can go home. No. This is like entry level. This is table stakes, You've got this together. You're ready to start playing. You're really, really ready to start playing to win. If you don't have this, go home. Forget about it. I spoke to, a couple of people in Sydney who I know about this talk, people who don't work at Atlassian. And they said, at Atlassian you have like 20% time, you have innovation projects and you have Ship It, which is a competition where we work on, like every quarter we have a competition, like a programming competition to build a feature in 24 or 48 hours. And they were like, aren't you guys doing this all the time? Like, isn't it really innovation driven? And I'm actually, Atlassian is quite a strongly PM driven culture, right? We have product managers. They're very good at what they do. Part of their whole job is looking at this stuff, the problem, the business impact, and the solution. If you have an idea which is outside that kind of core of, what forms the roadmap, you need to almost do this kind of as good or better than them. So, I call the next part of my talk champagne disruption, and it's about really taking your idea from those 3 points to the next level. Now, I've got 5 fantastic points. Someone said, you know what, you should increase it to 10 and do like a top 10, that'd be cool. And I'm like, you're saying I should like cook up like 5 bullcrap points just to make it 10? That's a horrendous idea. So, my 5-step plan. The first thing, establish your own credibility, right? Who are you? Who's this person who's proposing this idea? Do you have a track record of taking things to like 80% and never 100%? Have you done your homework, right? Who are you trying to convince? Is it a business manager? Is it a product manager? What are their priorities? Do you know them? Common arguments, right? So in my case, there are some common objections to performance. So people might say, hey, we're actually better than competitors. No, I've got this data saying that, we're at the same level as some competitors, we're in front of some, and we're behind some. They might say it doesn't actually impact stuff, or it doesn't impact the conversion of evaluators, people trying software. No, I've got data from other companies showing that, in fact, performance does have a big impact on that. Do that homework. Establish that credibility. The second thing, define what success looks like. Now, this really aligns to the solution part of my, 3-step plan. What does success look like in your plan? How do you know when you're on track, right? Is it a good solution? I took a proposal for accessibility to one of the products. And the plan sort of looked like this. It was, what we'll do, we need 2 developers for 3 months. We'll identify a bunch of accessibility issues and, we'll just fix them. And I thought that was an okay plan, but really to a decision maker, to a planner, that's kind of like a hipster plan. It just sort of sounds like, yeah, man, we'll just go in and fix a bunch of stuff and it'll be great. That's not a plan. This is a plan. We will identify a backlog of issues in conjunction with an expert testing partner. From that, we'll prepare a backlog, we will size it, and we will prioritize it according to what meets varying levels of accessibility. At each stage of the plan, we'll know from the start roughly how long this is going to take, and week by week, we'll be able to track success, track how far we are on this. Are we on track? Are we behind? Are we in front? That's a plan. That's a plan that someone can really get behind. Now, unsurprisingly, my initial plan didn't really achieve much success. I've had more success since then. The third point, who's doing this and when? Have you done your homework? Do you have ideas? Who in your organisation, which team is doing this? Which developers, which testers, designers? What are they currently working on? Is it less important than what you're proposing? Is it more important? When having another stab at accessibility, one of the other issues that I came up with when I proposed an accessibility project to one of the products, I said, okay, this is the plan for accessibility, what are you going to develop this? Are you going to fund it? And they sort of said, look, it's a great idea and we get behind it, but you know what? We actually just finished planning for the next 6 months, and we've got headcount allocated, we've got new hires allocated, we've got space, where people are going to sit. That's a very hard argument to have, right? You're convincing someone you've done all this work, actually you should change your mind. If I'd been 3 or 4 weeks earlier, that would have been a very different story. So, who are you trying to convince? What's their schedule? What's their planning schedule? Learn it. Get to know them. Go for lunch with them, whatever. I don't think people in Atlassian don't generally, that's not guarded information. You can talk to people about that. The fourth part of my plan, synchronize your objectives. If you're trying to convince a decision maker of an idea, put yourself in a decision maker's shoes. If your priorities are A, B, and C, and someone comes to you and says, hey, you should be concerned about D as well, that's a tough conversation to have. If your priorities are A, B, and C, and someone says, hey, I know you're concerned about A, and I've got something which is going to help you achieve A, that is a much easier conversation to have. In the case of performance, I know that some of the products were looking at onboarding, right? So what does the first 5 minutes engaging with a product do when someone's new to a product? What's the first week look like? What's the first hour? How can we make it better? How can we convert more evaluators by making that a better experience? If I can tie performance to that, and I did by comparing data from places like Amazon, Walmart, who have got data showing that better performance increases the conversion of shopping sales, and that maybe our performance could be better at the evaluator stage, then that's an easy argument, right? I'm aligning with something that they already want to achieve. The fifth point is that this takes time. From the point where I started working on metrics, right? My initial project had failed, and I just spent the next kind of 9 months working on metrics, landing them, and those metrics and data essentially became the core of the argument for why we need to focus on performance. That was a long time. What I learnt was this. I used to go over to people's desks or contact them or email them or walk up to them and say, hey, this is how you need to fix this. And they're like, I hadn't even convinced them of the why. I learned that what works, if you're ever walking over to someone, if you're ever initiating contact with them, sending them an email, you just tell them why. You tell them why performance is an issue. You tell them why your idea is necessary. I'm now at the point where people walk over to my desk and they say, okay, you've convinced us, how do we actually fix this? And it's only when they come to you that it's time to start talking about how you do something. What are the nuts and bolts of the implementation? So, that is essentially my talk. The core stuff, define the problem, show that it's a problem, show that there's a business impact, and propose a solution. Make people feel that this thing is achievable. Onto the champagne. Establish your credibility, define success, who's going to be doing it, synchronize your objectives, and accept the amount of time that it's going to take to really land. Above all, put yourself in a decision maker's shoes. What are they thinking? What are their objectives? How can you align to what they want? Thank you very much. Thanks for listening. Hope the rest of your summit is fantastic. Cheers.